I need a mother for my daughters, and you need a home." The widowed cowboy offered marriage to the shunned bride. Chapter 1. The prairie wind swept across the lonely plains, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and sagebrush. The little town of Willow Creek sat quietly on the edge of nowhere, its wooden storefronts weathered, its people hardened by long winters and harsher summers. Everyone knew everyone here, or thought they did. In such a place, stories about a person spread faster than wildfire, whether true or not. Mary Ellen knew that all too well. She kept her eyes lowered when she walked through town, her faded blue dress brushing the dirt as she hurried past the mercantile and blacksmith. Whispers trailed behind her like a shadow. "There goes the shunned bride," someone muttered under their breath. Another voice, sharp with judgment, followed. "Poor girl. Couldn't keep a husband." Her cheeks burned, but she never spoke back. What was the point? Words hadn't defended her when her first husband had abandoned her 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but shame and a tarnished name. He'd called her barren in front of others, declared she wasn't fit to be a wife, and rode out of town without a backward glance. She had been branded ever since. So Mary Ellen lived on the edge of town in a tiny shack, mending clothes for coins, baking bread to sell when she could. Each night she prayed for the strength to face another day. She wanted nothing more than a chance to start fresh, but chances didn't come easy to women with a reputation like hers. Across the plains, life was no easier for Jacob Turner. Jacob was a widowed cowboy, tall and broad-shouldered, with lines etched deep into his face from both sun and sorrow. His wife, Sarah, had died 3 winters ago, giving birth to their youngest daughter, Emma. Since then, Jacob had carried the weight of fatherhood and ranching alone. His ranch stretched wide and wild, filled with rolling pastures and cattle that needed tending sunup to sundown. Yet the hardest part wasn't the work, it was the loneliness. Every evening, when the day's chores were done, Jacob would sit by the fireplace with his daughters. 9-year-old Clara, thoughtful and quiet, tried to act older than her years, helping where she could. Little Emma, with curls the color of honey, still cried for the mother she barely remembered. Jacob did everything he could, braiding Clara's hair with clumsy fingers, rocking Emma to sleep when the nightmares came, but he knew his daughters were growing up without a woman's tenderness. They needed guidance, a gentle hand, someone to teach them the things a father could not. And Jacob, though he never admitted it aloud, he needed someone too. It was a Saturday morning when fate finally brought their paths together. Jacob had taken his daughters into town for supplies. Clara held Emma's small hand as they followed their father into the mercantile, the wooden floor creaking beneath their boots. Mary Ellen was already there, standing at the counter, clutching a small sack of flour she hoped to trade for sewing needles. Jacob noticed her right away. She stood with her shoulders slightly hunched, as though bracing herself against invisible blows. Her auburn hair was tied back neatly, though her dress was patched and worn thin. The shopkeeper barely looked at her, his tone dismissive, as though her very presence was a burden. Jacob's jaw tightened. He'd seen that look before, the way people turned their backs on someone when gossip had marked them. He didn't like it. As Mary Ellen stepped aside, their eyes met. Hers were the color of storm clouds, wary yet searching, as though she expected nothing good to come from the world. He tipped his hat politely. She blinked, startled, then gave a small nod before lowering her gaze again. Clara, curious as always, tugged on her father's sleeve. "Pa, who's that lady?" Jacob glanced down at his daughter, then back at Mary Ellen. He didn't answer right away. Something inside him stirred, a thought, unshaped but insistent. By the time they left the mercantile, Mary Ellen was walking toward the edge of town, her sack of flour clutched tightly. Jacob found himself watching her. His daughters needed someone gentle. And that woman, she needed something too. "Clara," Jacob said quietly, lifting Emma onto his hip. "Stay with your sister a moment." He strode across the street, his boots crunching on gravel. "Miss Ellen," he called. She froze, then turned slowly, her expression guarded. "Yes, Mr. Turner." He nodded once, respectful. "I don't mean to trouble you, but I reckon you're walkin' back home. Let me see you safely there." Her lips parted in surprise. Most men in town didn't offer her kindness, let alone protection. For a moment, she almost refused out of habit, but something in Jacob's steady gaze stopped her. She nodded faintly. "Thank you." The walk was quiet at first, broken only by the rustle of the prairie grass. Mary Ellen felt his presence beside her, solid, unhurried, not prying. Finally, she spoke. "Folk won't take kindly to you walkin' with me." "I don't give a damn what folk think," Jacob replied simply. She glanced up at him then, startled again. His tone wasn't harsh, it was calm, steady, as though he meant every word. Something inside her chest ached at the unexpected kindness. When they reached her little shack, Jacob stopped and studied the crooked roof, the walls barely holding against the wind. His daughters deserved warmth, laughter, a home filled with care. This woman deserved shelter, dignity, and a chance to start anew. He took a deep breath. "Miss Ellen, I ain't one for talkin' in circles, so I'll say it plain." Her brows furrowed. "Say what?" Jacob met her eyes directly, his voice low but steady. "I need a mother for my daughters, and you need a home." Mary Ellen's heart stopped. She stared at him, unable to believe what she'd just heard. Was this widowed cowboy truly offering her what she had longed for but never dared hope again? Her voice trembled. "You don't even know me." Jacob shook his head. "I know enough. I know my girls need someone with kindness in her eyes. And I reckon you need someone to stand by you. Folks have been cruel, but I don't care for their words." Tears pricked Mary Ellen's eyes, though she tried to blink them away. After years of scorn, here was a man offering her not pity, but dignity. Still, fear gripped her. "What if I'm not what your daughters need?" Jacob's gaze softened. "We'll figure it out together." Behind him, Clara and Emma waited, curiosity bright in their eyes. Clara tilted her head, studying Mary Ellen with a seriousness far beyond her years. Then, as if making her own judgment, she smiled shyly. Emma reached out a small hand toward Mary Ellen, giggling as though she'd already decided she liked her. Mary Ellen's breath caught. For the first time in years, she felt the faint stirrings of belonging. Jacob extended his hand, roughened by years of ranch work. "So what do you say, Miss Ellen? Will you consider my proposal?" The prairie wind swept around them, carrying away the whispers of the town. For Mary Ellen, it felt like standing at the edge of a new life, one built not on shame, but on hope. She looked at Jacob's hand, then into his steady eyes. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "Yes, I'll consider it." And though she tried to remain cautious, a fragile smile touched her lips. For the first time in a long time, Mary Ellen dared to believe she might not have to walk alone anymore. The days following Jacob's unexpected proposal passed like a blur for Mary Ellen. She couldn't stop hearing his words echo in her mind. "I need a mother for my daughters, and you need a home." She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe that a man like Jacob Turner, steady, hard-working, and respected, truly meant what he said. But fear clung to her. The town's whispers had branded her unworthy, and she had learned to carry rejection like a scar. Still, something had shifted inside her that day. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. Jacob, meanwhile, wasted no time. He was a man who believed in action more than talk. After Mary Ellen's soft, "Yes, I'll consider it," he gave her space but made sure she knew his intentions were real. Each evening, he stopped by her shack with firewood, bread, or a jar of honey from his neighbors' hives. Clara and Emma began to look forward to those visits. Clara, cautious and observant, often peppered Mary Ellen with questions about sewing, baking, and flowers. Emma, too young to understand the weight of grown-up matters, simply clung to Mary Ellen's skirts as if she'd always belonged there. Mary Ellen found herself softening. Her heart ached each time she saw Jacob kneel by the fire to braid Clara's hair or rock Emma to sleep, exhaustion heavy in his eyes. He was doing everything he could for his daughters, but no man should have to bear such burdens alone. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Jacob stood on her doorstep with his hat in hand. "Miss Ellen," he said, his voice steady, "I don't mean to rush you, but my girls and we need you. And I reckon you need us too." She looked at him then, really looked. His honesty, his quiet strength, the way he never once mentioned her past, it melted the walls she'd built around her heart. "All right," she whispered. "I'll marry you." The wedding was simple, held on a Sunday morning in the small wooden church on the hill. Few people came, mostly because few were invited. Mary Ellen didn't want stares or whispers on what should be her new beginning. Clara wore a ribbon in her hair, Emma clutched a small bouquet of wildflowers, and Jacob stood tall in his best shirt, his hand steady as he held Mary Ellen's. When the preacher asked if he would take this woman to be his wife, Jacob didn't hesitate. "I will," he said firmly. When it was Mary Ellen's turn, her voice trembled but carried through the church. "I will." And just like that, the shunned bride became the cowboy's wife. Life on the Turner Ranch was not easy, but it was filled with something Mary Ellen hadn't felt in years: purpose. She woke each morning to the sound of roosters crowing and the sight of Clara helping in the kitchen. Together they baked biscuits, fried bacon, and packed lunches for Jacob before he rode out to the pastures. Emma toddled at her side, eager to stir batter or feed scraps to the chickens. Mary Ellen poured herself into her new role, not because she had to, but because her heart demanded it. She mended clothes, planted a vegetable garden, and filled the house with the smell of warm bread. For the first time in years, laughter echoed through her days. But it wasn't just chores and cooking. It was small moments: brushing Clara's hair by lamplight, teaching her how to stitch a hem, rocking Emma to sleep with a lullaby. Each act healed a wound inside Mary Ellen she hadn't realized was still bleeding. Jacob noticed. He noticed how his daughters blossomed under her care, how Clara began to smile more, how Emma's giggles filled the ranch. And he noticed Mary Ellen herself, the way her eyes lit up when the girls hugged her, the way she hummed softly as she kneaded dough. At night, when the girls were asleep, Jacob would sit by the fire with Mary Ellen. At first they spoke of small things: the cattle, the weather, the town. But slowly, their conversations deepened. He shared memories of Sarah, the wife he had loved and lost, and Mary Ellen listened without jealousy. She knew grief had shaped him, just as abandonment had shaped her. One evening, Jacob reached across the table and took her hand, rough and calloused. "Mary," he said quietly, "I ain't a man of fancy words, but I want you to know, you belong here. With me. With my girls. You're not alone anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed his hand back. "Thank you, Jacob, for giving me a chance." Of course, not everyone in town was pleased. Whispers followed them whenever they rode in for supplies. "Imagine him marrying her," the butcher's wife muttered once, loud enough for Mary Ellen to hear. "Couldn't find anyone better?" Jacob's jaw had tightened, but Mary Ellen surprised him by lifting her chin and walking past without a word. She no longer lived for their approval. She had a family now, and that was all that mattered. Besides, the whispers began to change. Folks saw the difference in the Turner girls: how Clara laughed more freely, how Emma ran to Mary Ellen with open arms. They saw the ranch thriving again, the house filled with warmth. Slowly, grudgingly, people began to realize that perhaps the widowed cowboy had seen something in the shunned bride they had been too blind to see. As the seasons passed, love grew quietly between Jacob and Mary Ellen. It wasn't the fiery kind that burned bright and fast. It was steady, like the rhythm of the prairie wind, strong enough to weather storms. One autumn evening, after the harvest was stored and the girls were asleep, Jacob and Mary Ellen stood on the porch watching the stars. The air was crisp, and the scent of hay lingered in the breeze. Jacob slipped his arm around her shoulders. "When I asked you to marry me, I thought I was just finned in a mother for my girls," he admitted softly. "But I reckon I found more than that. I found a partner, a friend, a woman I'm proud to call mine." Mary Ellen leaned into him, her heart swelling. "And I found a man who didn't see my shame, only my worth. You gave me back my life, Jacob." He kissed her forehead gently, his voice rough with emotion. "No, Mary. You gave us life again." The Turner Ranch became a place of second chances. Clara grew under Mary Ellen's guidance into a strong, capable young woman. Emma, with her laughter and mischief, grew up knowing the love of both a father and a mother. And Mary Ellen, once the outcast bride, whispered about and shunned, was no longer alone. She was a wife, a mother, and a woman who had found home not just in a house or land, but in the hearts of those who loved her. Jacob had been right all along. He needed a mother for his daughters, and she needed a home. But what they all found together was something greater, a family, bound not by perfection, but by love strong enough to heal even the deepest scars. and as the prairie winds carried across the plains, the Turner family stood tall, proof that sometimes, out of brokenness, the truest kind of love can grow.